Welcome back to the Love You Sew Patterns YouTube channel. Today we will be making the Leah Travel Bag. The Leah Travel Bag has two different views, view A being more of a purse style backpack and view B being more of a project bag. This sew along is going to focus on view B, the project style bag. You can see that it does not have a front flap with that front compartment, but it still has those accordion side gussets to help expand out that bag. There are elastic slots, a large open compartment, and it does not have the backpack straps that you see in view A. There is a nice opening for yarn or another fiber craft, and also it still includes that nice slip pocket where you can place a book or a Kindle. Both of the side gussets have nice pockets for you to put some accessories or your cell phone. Both views have that great top handle to hold and also an adjustable strap. Both versions have slip pockets and also this great zippered welt pocket that can keep your items secured. The entire lining is installed with bias binding, and then you have two-way zippers on both the main and front compartments. Before we get started, we got to check our inventory. Make sure that we cut out all of the templates, interface them, and add in all of the markings per your template pieces. Right now we have the primary panels with both the main fabric and then two lining pieces. Then we have the front panel main along with two side pocket mains and two side pocket linings. Then we have the exterior slip pocket main and the lining. And then we have the front compartment with one main and two linings since we're making view B. As you've already noticed, I'm using two different fabrics for the linings to better show the steps throughout this video. And here are our 4 pieces of the Accordion Gusset along with the Compartment Gusset main and lining. Here are the compartment slip pocket linings along with the interior slip pocket linings. Then we have the Welt zipper pocket lining already marked for that zipper opening. And now we have the top front gusset along with the top rear gusset. The zipper is going to run right through that cut in the fabric between the front and the rear gussets. And then we have 4 lining pieces of the side gusset, again in 2 different fabrics. And now we have the bottom gusset in both the main fabric and the lining. And with this bottom gusset, I just want to show you that the non-woven interfacing has been sandwiched in between the main fabric and the woven interfacing. Right? Make sure to press really well because it will give the bag so much more structure. And make sure you do the same with the front and rear top gussets as well. And for our other supplies, we have 1-inch webbing, enough for all of the view B features. We have our 2 1-inch swivel clasps along with a slider. We have our 2 triangle rings, and then of course our zippers, all marked for the main compartment, the front compartment, and then also the Welt zipper pocket. We have our grommets and of course our bias tape to finish things off. Let's get started. We want to make sure we prep our zippers and the webbing. Make sure everything is marked. This is the front compartment zipper, so you have your center markings and then your 4 1/4 markings from the end. Then you have the front compartment zipper marking only the center on this zipper, and then your Welt zipper. Make sure to sew on the ends of all of your zippers to make sure that those sliders are not falling off. Now it's time to make the handle. You will have 2 pieces of webbing cut. Make sure that you are working with the longer piece and the shorter one is set aside for the accessory bar later. Mark your webbing according to the instructions and then grab your little piece of cording and add that into the center, matching up markings. Do you have to use the cording? You do not have to, but it adds a little bit of extra structure when you hold on to that rolled handle. You will want to sew alongside the cording, and you can use a zipper foot just like what I'm using here, and I'm using some scrap webbing to help balance out the presser foot. If the presser foot is raised too high with the thickness of this webbing, it can produce uneven stitches. So using the scrap piece of webbing allows that foot to stay in place. You can of course use that narrow foot that I showed earlier if you have one for your machine. Once you're done, set this aside and we can move on to the next step. Now it's time to make the adjustable strap. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of the making of the teal strap, and I'm going to recycle a little bit of this footage of how to make a 1-inch wide adjustable strap, and it's all using the same exact steps. You will add in your adjuster first, your slider, and then you will slip on one of the swivel clasps. Fold over the end by about 1 inch and then fold over twice to make sure that that swivel clasp is fully encased. Glue it into place and then add your second swivel clasp, making sure that the strap is not twisted in any. Then you want to go underneath the slider and go over the bar, fold over the end by about 1 inch and glue into place, making sure that that raw end is fully wrapped around that adjuster bar. Clip into place and make sure that the adjustable strap is working as it should. And once all of the glue is dried, it is time to add in the rivets. Make sure to mark your strap and the placement of your rivets. I am eyeballing things like usual, but you should definitely mark just to make sure that you are completely centered. I'm using a punch plier in order to make the holes, and then since I'm using polyester based webbing, I can flash it with a lighter to help melt that hole so that it doesn't unravel with time. Then I am grabbing my double cap rivets and placing them within the hole and using my press to add them on. Of course, you can add rivets on manually, and you can check out my video of how to do that without a press. Check out your work, make sure that all the rivets are secure and that your strap is working as it should. And here is the actual strap that I made previously and lost the footage of. As you can see, all of the parts of the strap are made exactly like the vanilla webbing one. Set the strap aside and it's time to move on. Now we are going to get into a little bit of batch sewing, which is a little different from the instructions. Right now you see that I have the side pockets, have those right sides together, and we'll just sew a straight seam. And then I have the exterior slip pocket, same thing, where I'm going to sew a straight seam across the top, but with a larger seam allowance. Then I have the accordion gusset, and then the compartment slip pocket, along with the interior slip pocket. Again, all of these are right sides together, and then I can batch sew them through my machine. Just make sure that you are able to recognize which ones are going to be at your regular seam allowance and then which one, aka just the exterior slip pocket, is going to have a more generous seam allowance in order to accommodate that snap later on. And you can see that's why I left it for last, so I can make sure that I have that nice 5/8 inch seam allowance for my exterior slip pocket. And once you're done, you make sure to clip all of the corners to reduce bulk. Press down on all of the pockets in the accordion gusset, and then it is time to top stitch. So right here I am top stitching the compartment slip pocket and then basting all the way around. Set that aside, and then it's time to work on both sets of the side pocket. Top stitch and then make sure that the lining and the mains are aligned to baste together. Then you have 2 sets of accordion gussets to top stitch along the fold and again baste both of the linings together. And then let's not forget the interior slip pocket. Again, we are going to top stitch along the fold and baste both of the linings together. Set everything aside and we'll focus on the exterior slip pocket. And just like before, we are going to top stitch along that fold. But this time, instead of stopping there, we are going to run a second line of stitching parallel to that first row. And this is going to secure that wide seam allowance all the way down. It's going to give that fold a little more heft and a little bit more structure to accommodate the snap later. And just like with the rest of those pockets, we are going to baste the rest of it together. Once everything looks good, it's time to grab the primary panel main and then place the exterior slip pocket on top, matching all of the sides and the bottom notches. With everything matched, you also want to make sure that the snap marking aligns with the snap marking on the primary panel. You can see I'm using my awl to make sure that everything aligns and it's going through the same way. Off camera, I added a little piece of non-woven interfacing where that snap is going to go, because you want to make sure that it is reinforced so that that snap isn't going to shift on you later. I decided to use magnetic rivet snaps, and I just love these because they are so easy to install versus using the prong style magnetic snaps. Make sure that the snaps completely align, adjust the pocket as needed, and then it is time to baste all the way around the pocket to the back panel. And since we're making view B, we're going to move straight over to the accordion gusset. Whatever side you want to face out when that front compartment is open is what you want to fold in together. So the stripes is what I want to have shown when the zipper is open. So that is folded together, and now I am sewing the spine of the accordion. Make sure to backstitch very well, because that is going to be a spot with a lot of stress. Now with the right side of the accordion gusset, again the striped side, that is going to be placed up on your work surface, and you're going to align one end of the front compartment zipper to the bottom. Right now I'm clipping everything into place, and I'll show you how everything will align, and then we'll move over to the machine. But from here you want to clip everything in together, and then you want to open up that zipper to help align the notch with the top edge of that accordion gusset. It's very important to use a pin here because so much of that accordion gusset wants to shift as well as with the zipper. So you want to pin the top into place at the notch and then ease the rest of the zipper to the edge of the accordion gusset. Make sure to repeat on the other side of the zipper, and then I'll show you everything again at the machine. You can see that with the coil of the zipper and with the spine of the accordion gusset, you're going to jump over a lot of bulk, and so it's nice to use the pins to keep everything in place so that things are not shifting around too much. So once that has been sewn in place, again, you want to pin the notch to the top edge of the gusset, ease everything into place, and then baste the zipper to the accordion gusset. Repeat with the other side of the zipper, and then repeat all of these steps with the remaining accordion gusset. Once you are finished basting everything into place, make sure to double check that when you open up the zipper, you will reveal the accordion gusset and that the back spine of the accordion gusset is on the same side as the back of the zipper. Now it's time to finish the compartment gusset. And this is what your compartment zipper should look like right now. Then you want to grab your compartment gusset lining and match it right sides together with the gusset, and then grab your compartment lining main and match the short end to the zipper right sides together with the zipper. And then we are going to create a loop. So again, you're going to match the main with the right side of the zipper, matching at the raw short ends, and then grab the lining and match that to the accordion gussets, again aligning those short ends. Now it's time to move over to the machine and sew the entire gusset lining and main to the zipper. We are going through a ton of bulk right here, so make sure to increase your stitch length as needed, backstitch well, and use a hump jumper if needed, or an extra piece of fabric to help level out that presser foot. Once you are done, make sure that the gusset all flips out, nothing is twisted, and it all aligns up properly. Then go in and trim off as much of the corners of the seam allowance as possible, because we'll need to sew that all in and make the front compartment link. After pressing well and making sure that the notches match along the compartment gusset, pin those together and baste everything along the long edge into place. Then switch over to a regular length stitch and top stitch along the fold where the gusset meets the zipper. Again, baste along the long edge of the gusset and top stitch once you meet the fold along the zipper. Take your time going over the zipper teeth and hand crank if needed in order to make sure that you don't bust a needle in the process. And now it's time to move on to the elastic slot lining. If you are looking for the card slot lining, I'm going to link the process here as a part of the Irene crossbody bag. To get started, you want to grab both of your elastic pieces and divide each piece of elastic into 8 segments. The easiest way to do this is just to fold the elastic in half, mark, divide both of those halves into quarters, and then turn those quarters into 8ths. Once marked, you will match each of the elastic segments to that on the lining panel. You'll notice that the elastic is taller than the panel itself, and it will then produce a little hump where you will have the volume for any of your tools. Once everything is secured down, I like to use pins to make sure that nothing is shifting. Then you will go to your machine and sew everything down together very well. This is going to have a ton of stress, so you want to make sure that you backstitch. The way I like to sew these slots is that I just keep going. I don't even cut in between each of my seams. So you'll see that I am sewing one, not cutting, and then immediately moving to the next seam so that I can keep things efficient and you are keeping the tension down on the thread, since we're only sewing a 1/4 inch seam at a time. Once you are all done, make sure to go ahead and clip all of the extra thread, and then repeat this entire process with your remaining piece of elastic. With the front compartment elastic lining complete, now we are going to work on the front compartment slip pocket. You want to grab the slip pocket that we had already sewn and fold it in half in order to make a marking to split it evenly. I'm going to additionally split one of the halves so that I have these little 1/4 pockets, but you can divide your pocket however you like. Then take the pocket and match it to the bottom of the front compartment lining, and then you will baste the pocket into place. Once the pocket has been basted into place, then it's time to divide the slip pocket into its different segments. You can just sew a single seam and backstitch well, or you can sew the seam like how I do, by making a very slim and narrow box at that seam. By adding that second row of stitching to the divided pocket, it really helps to strengthen each of the segments, since this pocket will get a ton of wear. Now it's time to move on to the primary panel lining. These steps are going to look very familiar. They are going to be just like that front compartment lining, except we are just going to divide this slip pocket into 2 different spaces. So we will baste and then sew that narrow box down in order to divide that slip pocket again. And now it's time to add the accessory bar to the pocket. What this accessory bar does is that it just helps anchor in any taller tools or items that you might want to add into your project bag. You can see that my 1 inch wide webbing has already been marked. I'm going to add just a little bit of glue underneath where I will be sewing, and that's going to be aligned to the center of the panel, and then I'm going to clip the rest of the webbing into place. And you can see that it's a little bit longer. It's going to hang off, but we'll sew it and then trim it later. At the machine, we are going to sew a narrow X box, and of course you will find all of the measurements within the instructions. I like to use the X box for its strength and for the ability to last much longer, but if you want to just sew one straight seam, that is fine too. Once we get to the ends of the accessory bar, you will just baste them into place and then trim off the excess webbing. Don't forget to also trim off those extra hanging threads, and then it is time to grab the back panel. You are going to place it wrong sides together with the interior slip pocket and align all edges and corners together. I always like to start with the center top and then the center bottom, then the sides, and from there you can ease the edges all into place. Make sure to flip over to the lining side just to make sure that everything is flat and nothing is bunched up. Additionally, I am going to add in a couple of pins just to make sure that the top area doesn't shift, because we are going to mark the grommet, and I want to make sure that everything is centered and in place and we are not going to have anything move around. Then it's time to move over to the machine, and just like before, we will base the entire back panel together. And then I would like to show you how I install a grommet hole. You can use whatever method you prefer, obviously following the manufacturer's instructions, but what I like to do is I like to reduce my stitch length to a very short stitch, and then sew just to the outside of my grommet opening. The stitches should be hidden by the grommet itself later on. What I'm doing is just making sure that the fabric is secured together, so when it comes to installing the grommet, we are not shifting and accidentally not missing some of the fabric. You want to make sure that the grommet is going to catch all of the fabric underneath. Once the circle has been sewn, you just want to carefully cut around your marking for the grommet opening. I like to always err on the side of being a little bit too small, and then be able to cut a little bit more as needed. Double check that your hardware fits the grommet hole, and then use a seam sealant to seal up those edges. Once everything has dried, you are now ready to install the hardware. You can see that I actually added a second row of stitching all around the grommet because I had enough room to add in to keep that hole nice and secure. With this hardware, I have a front and then also a back washer. There are some varieties of hardware where you might just have the one front piece, but I like to have the washer in the back so that you don't have any snagging in case that hardware hole does split. And I love having my grommet die to use with my hardware press. It makes things so much more easy and of course quicker. I definitely would recommend it. Now you can set the back panel aside and we will work on the Welt zipper pocket. You can see the Welt pocket has been marked on the wrong side and has been placed with the right side of the primary panel lining. And you want to make sure that everything is lined up per the measurements in the instruction. To create the pocket opening, you're going to sew all the way around that zipper box, going through the Welt pocket and through the primary panel lining. Make sure to keep those corners nice and sharp, and I like to backstitch just one stitch right around those corners to reinforce them. Once you are done, you want to cut right through the center of the long side of the pocket, and you will just grab a seam ripper just to get started, and then a sharp pair of scissors to cut down the center, and then you may need some smaller profile scissors to get into those corners without cutting through any of the stitching. Once the opening has been cut, you are going to push the pocket through the opening so that it is wrong sides with the primary panel lining. Then you would need to press all of the edges of that zipper opening. I'm just finger pressing first, making sure that all of the fabric is laying straight and that you're not getting any wrinkles in those corners. If you need to, you can snip into those corners in order to make sure that all the fabric lays straight. Make sure to press well, and then we'll grab the Welt zipper itself. What I like to use is this 1/8 inch craft tape and add it on to the edges of my zipper, and this just allows everything to stay in place so much easier. I like to use the 1/8 inch so that my needle is not sewing into this tape and of course getting things gunked up. After removing the backing, you want to lay the zipper how you would like to use it on your work surface. I like to have my zipper go from left to right, so then you'll center it on the work surface and then take the Welt zipper and center it on top of the zipper, just making sure that everything is aligned properly. Once it looks good to you, it is time to sew all the way around the zipper opening with your machine. Right now you can see that I have my narrow presser foot, and I just love this foot because it will give me a nice edge stitching. Carefully sew all the way around the box, and since I am using a light colored thread against this dark blue, I am actually leaving long tail threads so that I can pull them from the wrong side and knot them off. This is a way to have a streamlined look without having that bulk of a lot of back stitches. Now it's time to close up the pocket by folding it in half with the right sides together. Press well, and then we are going to sew only the raw edges of the pocket. Make sure not to catch any of the primary panel lining piece in your sewing. And of course, we got to make sure to double check our work. Make sure that the zipper is opening the way that you would like and that the pocket is fully closed. Set the pocket aside, and now it's time to work on the front compartment. Lay the front compartment main right side up on your work surface, and then you will grab the compartment gusset and lay that on right sides together, and you will start matching up all of the notches. I'm missing some footage, so I'm apologize for just jumping straight into the pinning part, but you just want to make sure that the zipper is matched up top and that it is centered to the top notch, and that the bottom part of the gusset is again centered and matched to the bottom of the front compartment main. From there, you will ease the rest of the gusset into place. I like to always work on those straight edges first and then clip into those corners in order to get them to fit all the way around. You'll see that the compartment main ripples up a little bit, and that is where you know that you want to make your snips. Your snips should be about 1/8 of an inch long because your seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch. So you want to make sure that you are not snipping too much. Once you have pinned everything into place, it is time to head over to the machine to sew everything together. You will want to use a zipper foot if you do not have a narrow presser foot like I do. This narrow presser foot allows me to get around the zipper without running into it. But if you do not have it, make sure that you have that zipper foot in and just work slowly because you are going through a lot of bulk, especially with that zipper. So take your time and make sure to use an awl to help make sure that everything stays into place, and if you need to make extra snips along those corners, feel free to do so. If you are having issues sewing this narrow gusset to the front compartment main, there are a few things that you can do. You can use some mini staples to help keep the gusset in place instead of using pins or clips. The other thing you can do is also just use your needle and thread to sew some basting stitches to keep everything together, and it will definitely make sewing much more easy. And once you are done, make sure to check your work and that all of your seams are nice and straight and those corners are looking smooth. Now it's time to add the other side to that front compartment. We are going to grab that elastic slot lining that we made earlier, and we're going to place it right sides together with the front compartment. You want to make sure that you match up all of the notches. Again, I like to work with the top, then the bottom, then you will grab the sides, making sure to push away any of the gusset. It's always easier to align those straight sides first and then ease into all of those curved corners. It's going to be a little bit difficult to get some of those gusset pieces out of the way, but you just want to make sure that you evenly distribute all of that fabric so that you are not sewing into big lumps, and you just want to make sure that that is all eased in properly. You might have noticed that I also opened up the zipper. That will help allow the gusset to lay down a little bit more flat, and you will also probably have to move it while you are sewing, but that will help make things a little bit more easy to sew. Once you are ready, you will head over to the machine and sew on top of the stitches that you made in step 47. So we are going to go directly on top, so that means that the stitching that you had previously done is face up on your work surface. I am working incredibly slow just to make sure that I am right on top of those stitches using, this time I guess I grabbed my tweezers before I could find my awl, and this video is sped up to 2 times, so that is showing you how slow I'm going. And as I'm working around those corners, you can see that I'm lifting the presser foot in order to make sure those curves are smooth. Again, you should be sewing with a zipper foot, but I am using my narrow presser foot since it does allow me to get around these wide zippers. And don't forget to leave an opening to turn, which you can see is marked by my pins. And once you are done sewing, it is time to notch out all of these curved corners. You can definitely take a pair of regular scissors and notch them out that way, or you can use a pair of serrated scissors like I'm using here. I'm actually going to use a combo of both methods. But what I like to do is also notch alternating notches between my layers. This allows me to still get a nice curve when I turn this right side out, but it also mitigates any possibility of fraying and you being able to see any of the curved corners come out, and then you don't want to get any of those notches seen on the right side of your fabric. So after notching, you want to use your seam sealant to make sure that you do not get any fraying, and then it is time to turn this right side out. Carefully push out all of the corners, and I like the combination of the push and the pull method, but make sure you are very careful as you work this. Finger press all of the areas, make sure that all of the stitching is nice and clean. Then you will go in with your iron, and of course make sure to be cognizant of that elastic. You don't want it to melt. Then you want to take a look at that opening, refold in that seam allowance and pin it or glue it into place. I like to pin from the outside since that is where I am going to sew, and then that way you can make sure that the stitching is going to go through all the way to the line. So I'm at the machine and I am going to stitch in the ditch, which is stitching into the seam from the front, making sure that I catch the lining and then close up that opening while I sew. If this is not your preferred method, of course you are able to hand sew that opening shut as well. But I do love this method. It is a nice way to get it sewn quickly while not being able to see these stitches from the outside. Then of course it's time to check and make sure that that opening is all caught and of course closed. And then you can see that those stitches are hardly seen from the front of the compartment. Now you can grab the front panel and baste all around that large opening using a scant seam allowance. Now it's time to add that front compartment to the front panel. And we are going to do this, of course, by first marking the front panel. I forgot to do this earlier, so I am just making sure that I have the correct midpoints all the way around, and you are going to match everything to the notches, right sides together, so that you'll see all of the main fabric from the. And just like all the other previous steps, we want to make sure that we match the top, front, and the side notches first, working on those straight edges and then easing the rest of those corners into place. And with the zipper, I am going to pin all of this into place since there's always a little bit of bias stretch to all of the zipper tape. It just makes sure that I will have a nice even finish once we are done. And then it is time to go into all of those corners of the front panel, because you can see that the front gusset is all bunched up and we need to cut all of these little snips into the corner to make sure that the gusset fits in with the front panel. And of course, we're going to use some seam sealant to make sure that you are not getting any fraying at those snips. And you also want to make sure that the snips are not going beyond where you had made your scant basting stitches. And then you will continue to do this process up around the zipper as well. Again, making your small snips to open up that seam allowance, and then to pin or clip the zipper to all of the corners. Definitely take your time around all of this. The video is sped up about 3 times the actual pace. So you just want to make sure you go slowly, because this will be the front of the bag and what you see. And once everything is clipped or pinned into place, it is time to move over to the machine. So I'm working with the panel right side facing up because I am sewing directly on top of those basting stitches. Those basting stitches were at 1/4 inch, and that is your seam allowance. So that's going to allow you the best guide to make sure that everything is nice and even, and that your front compartment is going to be straight and level. The last thing you want is a wonky looking front compartment. Again, I'm actually moving incredibly slow. This part of the footage is sped up by about 8.5 times. So you know that I'm going incredibly slow, especially around those corners. And then before we close up this front compartment, make sure that everything is working. Those zippers and the gusset all make sense. Then it's time to add the slip pocket to the back of the front panel. Make sure that everything is aligned, it is facing the right direction, and then you begin to match those notches. Again, we're going to go with the top, the bottom, and the side. Again, always working on the straight sides and then easing all of the corners into place. As you work through adding in the front compartment slip pocket, you will definitely notice that you are working with a ton of extra bulk and thickness through all of these layers. So if you need to, you can clip into the corners of the front panel, and that will help ease that seam up against the slip pocket. And if you are still struggling to hold and grip onto all of that extra thickness, you may want to use a stapler to clip those corners into place. Another thing that you can do is also use your needle and thread to help base those corners together as well. I know that this is probably the most difficult part, and I should have given you a bigger seam allowance, but I know you can do it. And then again, around the zipper, I always like to use pins because the pins won't shift, and I have less bulk here and can use pins instead of clips. But again, the pins just make sure that everything won't shift and that from the outside that zipper is going to be nice and even. You are more than welcome to clip away bulk to also help make the sewing more easy. And now we are back at the machine. You can see I have my zipper foot in and am getting ready to sew the front compartment slip pocket to the front panel, and we are moving again pretty slowly, going over all of those previous stitches once more. Make sure to go nice and slow around those corners. If you are having any issues sewing, you may need to increase your stitch length, and if that doesn't work, you also may need to increase your needle size. You're going through quite a bit of bulk at this point, and so you may need to go to some heavier duty supplies. For your future Leah bag, if you would like to reduce layers, you can always change up your substrates and use something thinner like a ripstop or a lighter weight waterproof canvas that doesn't require interfacing. Another thing you can do is also to cut out any of the interfacing that would sit in the seam allowances, and then that will definitely reduce bulk if you are using quilt cotton and cotton canvas like I am doing. And once you are done, you want to make sure to inspect your work, and then it is time to move on to the top stitching. But before we do that, we want to make sure to press down on the front panel. Then you will head over to the machine and top stitch all around the front compartment, making sure to go all the way through to the seam allowance, and then that is going to keep the seam allowance secure and flush against the front panel. You can see that I had switched back to my narrow foot for the top stitching, and I have an increased stitch length to go through all of these layers. Don't forget to take your time here because you will see all of this top stitching from the front of your bag. And once you are done sewing, make sure to inspect your work and make sure that all of those seam allowances were caught in your sewing. And now it's time to grab that Welt zipper pocket and place it wrong sides together with the front panel. Make sure directionally everything is looking good. You match up those notches and then pin or clip into place. Of course, we're making sure that we got the top one, the side, and then the bottom ones. Flip over the panel and just to make sure that everything is aligned from that side as well and that you do not have any fold. Then baste the entire panel together, which has been done off camera. And now we'll move over to the primary gusset. And what I like to do here is to lay out both the top front and the top rear gussets out at the same time so that I can see directionally how I want to place everything. The zipper, of course, is going to go in between those pieces, and then I am able to visually just see where everything is going to go. You can see the zipper has already been prepped with that double-sided tape, and then you will place the main and the lining together, right sides together, in order to sandwich that zipper into place. Then sew through all of the layers, the zipper, the top main, and the top lining. Clip corners and press all of those layers, wrong sides together, and press well. You'll notice that I didn't really mention how to add the top front gusset because the zipper is a two-way zipper, so you could add it to either side. But now we are making sure that we take extra care when we add the top rear part of the gusset. Lay out your lining and your main fabric exactly the way that you want to see it with the zipper, and remember that the top front is what is going to face the front of the back, and the top rear is what is going to face the back panel. You will sandwich the zipper with the top rear main and the top rear lining. Align everything together, and then you will sew through all three layers. Make sure that the top front gusset is out of the way. Once you are done, remember to clip corners, then flip all of the gussets so the wrong sides are facing each other, and then you will press all of the pieces along the zipper. Align all the raw edges of the top rear gusset and the top front gusset together, and then you will baste the entire gusset together. Once you have finished basting the entire top gusset together, then you will go back and then top stitch the gusset along the zipper on both sides. You can see I am still using my narrow presser foot and am using that to top stitch for that nice 1/8 inch seam allowance. Inspect your work, and then it's time to move on to the handle. The handle has already been marked per the templates, and we are looking at the gusset exactly the way that it will be faced with the front facing us. Then you're going to add a little bit of glue to the wrong side of the handle in between the two Xbox markings. You do not want any glue where the triangle ring will be or where the handle is going to sit. Repeat on the other side of the handle and then allow to dry before sewing the X boxes down. Once everything is dried, it is time to head over to the machine, and we are going to start at the rightmost X box, and we are going to sew the edge, then cross over, go back down to the other edge of the X box, sew the other diagonal line, and then edge stitch all the way to the next X box. From here, we will sew a diagonal, then sew the inside of the box, sew another diagonal line, finish off the box, and then be able to double stitch that in order to reinforce it, and then come back and sew the other long edge of the handle down. Make sure to repeat on the other side of the handle. Then on the free ends of the handle, you will be able to slide in your triangle ring. Once it is pushed all the way to the X box, you want to sew that in place with a zipper foot or with a narrow presser foot. You just want to make sure that you are sewing up against that hardware as close as possible. And don't forget to repeat on the other side of your handle. Now it's time to take your two gusset linings and match up the short ends to the top gusset. Head over to the machine and you will sew through all of these layers with a regular seam allowance. Once you are done, you will want to snip any hanging threads and then clip into the corners to help reduce bulk when we assemble the bag later on. Flip those linings with wrong sides together and make sure to press well. Then we head back over to the machine where we will top stitch the gusset linings to that top gusset. Then we will baste all around the last three raw edges of the gusset linings. Then you will take your two remaining gusset linings and add it to the other side of your top gusset. With the gusset lining face up on your work surface, grab one of your pockets and align the bottom edges together and pin. You will notice that the top edge of the pocket is a little bit wider than the gusset itself, and that is to provide a little bit of volume in that pocket so it is not lost when we assemble the bag together. You will also notice that the pocket sits about a 1/4 inch above the seam line of the gusset lining. This is so that you do not see that lining from the outside of the bag. Once the sides have been all clipped together, it is time to go to the machine and baste all three edges of the pocket to the gusset, which has been done already off camera. And then add the remaining pocket to the other side of the gusset. With both pockets added on, it is now time to add the bottom gusset. You will again sandwich the top gusset with the bottom gusset pieces, the right sides of the main together, and then the right sides of the lining together. So through all layers and then bring the wrong sides together just to press. We will top stitch along that seam, but we are just going to save that until we add the full bottom gusset together for the primary gusset. So just like with the front compartment gusset, we are going to create a full loop by again placing the right sides of the main fabric together along with the right sides of the lining together. Then it's time to head over to the machine where we will now top stitch along the bottom gusset seam where it meets with the pocket. Then we will baste along that side seam, and then we will meet back up with the other side of the bottom gusset, switch back over to a regular stitch length in order to top stitch, and then go back to a basting stitch to close up the rest of the bottom gusset. Now it's time to finally finish up this bag. We are going to lay the front panel right side up, and then with the primary gusset wrong side out, you are going to start to match up all of those notches. Make sure that the top front gusset is matched up to the front compartment here. That is the narrow part of the primary gusset. That means the handle is going to be closer to you as you clip everything into place. And of course, you know, we match up all of the notches. Everything looks nice and straight. It doesn't look wonky at all. And then we go through and start to ease in all of those corners. And you can snip into the gusset as needed if you need to ease any of that around to fit around that front panel. Once everything is clipped and in place, you want to head over to the machine, and we are going to baste the primary gusset to the front panel. I am working down one of the sides first, and as I approach this corner, you can see that the fabric of the gusset is all bunched up and not able to meet the corner of that front panel. I'm going to use my little scissors to snip straight into that seam allowance, not going more than 1/4 inches, and that is going to allow that gusset to spread out and stretch a little bit into that corner so that it can be sewn evenly to that front panel. Continue to sew to baste all the way around the bag, snipping into the corners without going beyond 1/4 inch. And contrary to what I'm showing you in the video, which is some sped up video, make sure to move at your own pace, going carefully, making sure that the gusset isn't shifting as you move around that primary panel. You do not want it to accidentally shift and your final product be a little bit offset. After basting, if everything looks good and looks straight, then it is time to add the bias tape. This is a pre-made 1/2 inch double fold bias tape that I just bought from the store. I folded the short end in by 3/8 of an inch, and then am stretching all the way around the seam allowance of the bag in order to bind it. You can see that the bias tape is right sides together with the gusset. I always like to start and end at the bottom of the bag so that you don't see any of the folds of the bias tape. And that is exactly what I'm doing here. Once I reach the end and meet up with the beginning of the bias tape, I'm going to overlap by about 1/2 an inch to give myself a little bit of safety room. And we're back at the machine. We're going to sew with a larger seam allowance, a 3/8 inch seam allowance, in order to attach the bias binding and to finish off the bag. You might need to increase your stitch length to go through all of these layers once again, or you may need to increase your needle size at this point. When I attach bias binding, I also like to make sure that my thread matches the color of my main fabric, my exterior fabric. And that is just in case you do see any of the stitches, it will all match together and that you do not see some bright yellow or bright blue thread coming through to the front of the bag. As you can see, I am getting a lot of shifting of the bias tape as I'm sewing, and I guess I did not use enough muscle to stretch it out as I clipped around the bag, but that is no problem at all. We are luckily going to have extra bias tape at the end, which I am going to just cut. And as you move around these corners, just make sure to always take your time to make sure that these corners are nice and even and that you have the right seam allowance throughout your sew. And once you get to the end of your loop where the bias tape meets up with itself, you just want to make sure that you have at least a ½ inch overlap as shown. Now that the bias tape has been sewn on, you will take it and fold it over to encase that entire seam allowance. We want to get rid of all those raw edges. So again, we will fold in and clip along the straight edges and then ease the rest of the bias tape around those corners. Then when you get to the part where they meet up, you just make sure that you fold over and that those edges of the bias tape are nice and flat. If you are a quilter, you can go ahead and create a full continuous loop, but since we are making bags, we do not need that. Now it's back over to the machine where we are going to edge stitch this bias binding into place. I always like to start at the bottom of the bias binding and then work my way back around the entire pan. This bias binding definitely wants to shift quite a bit, and we are working through a ton of layers again. So I have my awl in hand in order to make sure that the binding is moved over and is covering all of my previous stitching along with all of that raw edge. So as long as you are pushing over that folded edge to cover your previous stitching, you will have a very nice pretty finish. And of course, make sure that you take your time top stitching this to make sure that you have a nice beautiful finish in the end. Once you are done, you will repeat steps 68 to 70 with the back of the bag. With both panels added and all of the bias tape on, it is time to turn the bag right side out. Make sure to push out all of the corners with your hand. Make sure that you have nice even seams and head over to your pressing station and press out all of those seams for a nice cube. And then you can grab your strap, add it on to your triangle rings, and you are ready to use that gorgeous new Leah Travel Bag. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you like and subscribe to the channel, and make sure you head to the video description for all of the tools and products used in this video.